We all have a story to tell. Let's tell yours. Welcome to the Intellectual People Podcast with your host, Jason. Come together and listen to journey stories and more from interesting people. Welcome your host, Jason.
Today I have Mike from Mike's Weather Page. How are you doing today, Mike?
Doing great.
Great.
I'm surviving this cold weather here in Florida, ready for the summer.
You're making a lot of people jealous because define your cold.
Oh, yeah, forget that this right now it's 60s. 67.
Yeah. There's a lot of people in the 30s, I'm sure, that would love to have 60s, right?
Okay, well, I didn't mean to offend any weather folks on that one. So yeah, it's we're enjoying the warm weather, I guess.
Agreed. I am as well. So I want to take you back to, well, I guess first thing, let's do this. Explain what Mike's Weather Page is.
Yeah, it's become, it started as a hobby. It still is a hobby in a sense. It was perfect. I mean, the purpose of it was in 2004. I was in college, taking business and learning a little bit about HTML, and we had these hurricanes coming towards Tampa, Charlie, and I couldn't find anything on the internet. It would drive me crazy trying to find models and graphics and satellites. So I said, I'm gonna make me a page to put my graphics on that I look for. Then I have them all in one spot. Fast forward, how many years ago was that? 2004, right? And it's still one page with a lot more graphics on it, but it's still like my little personal page of stuff I love to look at, and I don't have to go looking for them. So when I see a cool graphic, I'll throw it on the page, and there you go. And like Jim Cantori, Weather Channel, he's a fan, and he calls it, your one-stop shop for tropics. So it started as a hobby that I shared with family and friends, and somehow word got out. And slowly every year, just kind of, more and more people find it and like it.
Okay. So let's go back to when you were a young boy. Were you interested in weather always?
Yeah, I think it's in my genes. My grandfather tracked hurricanes. My dad was in the Air Force over in Patrick's Air Force Base. And when they moved to Florida in the 50s, I guess they had a couple back-to-back hurricanes. And growing up in like 85, we had Elena. And for some reason, I got attracted to Weather Channel and watching the cone. Waking up the next morning, it's like I used to. A few things excite me, but when you go to bed with a storm out in the water and you got that cone of uncertainty, I would always look forward to waking up in the morning and seeing. I think it's 19:49 past the hour. They would have the new tropical update. Now I just couldn't wait to see the new cone. Like are we in it? Are we getting close to it? Is it coming this way? It just slowly evolved into that, and then the I think living in Florida, it's just become a part of life. People. So something about the weather is just fascinates people, and now with the social media side, it's really it fueled my love of weather. Because now I'm not only concerned with Florida, it's become more of a worldwide project. And I'm servicing people all the way down to the, Lesser Antilles, the Barbados there, all the way to Cancun to Maine. It's crazy.
Right. So you, as a young child, were into the weather, and did it just continue to grow? You mentioned that you went to college for business, and this really started out more of an individual page for you to feed your passion of going to, as you said, one-stop shop for weather, right?
Mm-hmm.
So through college, you just kept monitoring weather and were still interested in it?
Yeah, I never really, I never went to meteorology. It's just a hobby, a hobby that's still a hobby that I just love every day. First thing I do when I wake up in the morning is look at models, and I love tracking long range, snow in the wintertime and following spring storms, and I'm learning every day, and I think that's just the fascination. Is just, and weather is so unpredictable. I mean, even last week, it was supposed to have been a big tornado outbreak in the upper Gulf, and nothing happened. And hurricanes are supposed to go one way, they go another way, or so even the best science in the world can't predict weather. So I think that's just the fun of it. It's a hobby. That's still a hobby. It's
Sure. And your website is called spaghettymodels.com, right?
Yep.
Can you explain why spaghetti models?
Well, that was the number one graphic that I was looking for in 2004. Was the models of all the different thinking of a storm. So like, I'm sure you see some TV stations called spaghetti plots or computer models. They call it spaghetti models because it looks like you take a bunch of spaghetti and throw it on a plate because you got them going every which way. And that was the little adrenaline rush I think we all get is when you have that one model pointing to your house.
Right.
So that we live and die by these spaghetti models. And the domain was available. You can also search Mike's weather page because half the time I don't even spell spaghetti right. Luckily, Google is my friend because you can misspell it and it'll still put you there. So it's just crazy. Yeah, spaghetti models. It's still used today on most all your news stations and even the NHC when they go into their discussions for tropical systems, they talk about individual models and there there's a half a dozen to a dozen really reputable models now, and you can't just pick one model.
Yep.
There's not a science to it. There's a lot of gut, your gut thinking. A lot of times, and you use a lot of history, and that it's kind of like gambling. I don't gamble, but I guess what I do on my blogs is people like to hear my thoughts.
Okay.
I kind of clone myself as a blogger. And that's kind of, I guess, what this has become. This website started is still my baby, the website. But
Right.
In 2009, I started Facebook, and that's almost become bigger in itself because of the constant live interactions and posts and the reach that it has. So that's a whole different side of this endeavor that I never dreamed was going to happen.
And I should mention that your Facebook page, correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, has over 1 million followers.
Yes, we hit 1 million this year. I remember I was at Chili's, my favorite place. I was having a drink one night, and I was inching towards my 5,000th fan. And I remember the waitress, I got her to like my page. I was so excited because I hit 5,000. And I look back now, it's like, oh my gosh. And now there's Twitter, Instagram. I'm trying to cater to those sides. We're, streaming on YouTube now.
Right.
Looking to go into Periscope because we have, folks on Twitter that don't go other places. And I even try to do a TikTok account, which I haven't figured out yet.
Got to get your kids to help you out with that.
Yeah, my daughter has more. She gets more likes than I get. So I haven't figured out. You can't be serious on TikTok. I started doing weather updates. I think they like to see the more drunk donkey, crazy side of Mike's weather page. Because, I got to forget the main attraction I think people like is the amateurness of, if that's even a word, and me butchering names all the time. But, I keep it real.
Yep. Absolutely.
Sometimes a little too much, but.
And we love that. And we'll get into the drunk donkey as well. I want to ask you about models because I think there's many parts of this, right?
Oh, yes.
So you know what you're looking at and how to read the models, if you will. And I think as the average person that obviously deals with weather daily, fortunately,
Mm-hmm.
I think every person out there says, oh my gosh, any meteorologist has the ideal job because they can be wrong and still get paid, right? I mean, we've all heard it, right?
Oh, yeah.
I want to be a weatherman one day. I want to be a weatherwoman one day because you can be wrong and it's still okay, right?
Yep.
So explain to the listeners why it's difficult, number one, and number two, what the models are, and also how unpredictable and how predictable they are and can be.
Yes. Well, so the meteorologists are scared of the spaghetti models because, like you just mentioned, if you don't know what you're looking at, people can take it the wrong way, especially, if you have that one model coming to your house or one model showing a Cat 5. So yeah, they can be a little tricky. I guess in a nutshell, it's almost like if you almost are taking an average of the models first off, and you have the Euro, you have the GFS. There's some newer players. Germany's got a model called the Icon. There's a Canadian model. The UK is the UK version. So there's 5-6 models. There's even an Access Australian model now. So there's about 6 to 8 good models, and what you're looking for, is consistency. And you learn over the years. Some have different biases. Like this season, the Euro had a really hard time on initialization of tropical cyclones. It did very well once the cyclone was established. The Icon was sniffing out storms before anybody else. So in a season, you start to get this gut feeling of like, okay, the GFS and the Icon are doing good this year. A lot of old schoolers, like this year, especially the Euro, wasn't doing very good at all. So they were discounting others, and I was pretty adamant a few times. Hey, we got something developing. I believed it because I look at more than just one model, and a lot of the old schoolers still look at just Almighty King Euro. So you have to adapt. You have to learn. Like even tracking winter, I'm learning the Euro is very aggressive on snow and cold, and the GFS isn't. So you have to be careful which model you advertise. So in the early days, I would be that guy that would pick that one, maybe the scariest looking model run, and that's very unethical now, because you can always find a 10-day model run, which most meteorologists say never post a model past 7 days, let alone 10 days, because there's a lot of uncertainty past 10 days, and the history shows a lot of times they don't verify. But what I do is I look at individual models come out every 6 hours per se. So we look at trends. When I pull the trigger and start posting, I feel confident enough that there's a good chance down the road we're going to see something. And that's using a blend of models, using climatology, looking at highs and lows. You can look at fronts, are a huge player, the jet stream. A lot of factors. You like I said earlier, you use a little bit of common sense and just gut. You use your gut a little bit on these models. There's never been one right model. Like Irma was a storm a couple years ago that everybody remembers Florida evacuated for. Originally, the Euro had it turning off the East Coast and missing Florida. The GFS actually had it curving on the west side of Florida. So what do you do as a forecaster? Right. Like you said, you're going to be wrong sometimes. And that was one time that the Euro was pretty wrong early on. Now, there's another side of this whole spaghetti models thing that I've learned over the last few years, where back to when I was maybe guilty of posting that one run of a model and saying, oh, look, Tampa's going to have a hurricane in 9 days. I might have posted the GFS run for 12Z, which is your morning run. 9 times out of 10, your noon run is going to be different. And then your 6 p.m. run is going to be different. So that's where you get really in trouble by posting that one run that looks like, oh my God, Tampa's going to get a Cat 3 hurricane. Now, there's another side of spaghetti models that I've learned a ton on, and I think people are catching up to is the ensembles. The ensembles, every model like the GFS and the Euro has a bunch of computers that are simulating different weather patterns. So the Euro's got like 51 of these ensembles. So where you have the one model of the Euro, you'll have 51 other versions of the Euro that run. And in this one run, it might predict that high pressure is a little stronger, high pressure a little lower, jet stream's a little high. It does all these what if scenarios. So your ensembles, you'll get 51 spaghetti models of just the Euro. And usually the Euro goes smack down the middle, because it's saying, okay, well, this is probably what's going to happen. But what you start to see with ensemble runs is you'll start seeing trends. The main operational run might say Louisiana. All of a sudden, 2/3 of your ensembles run afterwards, and they're starting to trend, let's say eastward. And then you can start to see the future. Like, okay, these models are starting to see, changes in the atmosphere happening. And that might be something the GFS, let's say the GFS was showing Florida, the Euro was showing Louisiana. But let's say a bunch of the Euro ensembles were also saying Florida, and all the GFS ensembles were saying Florida. You could go against the grain and say Euro's wrong because, right, look, ensembles are agreeing. So, you could just spend all day looking at spaghetti models.
So where do these models come from?
They're just GFS is American, our weather service. That's their model. There's individual models, maybe some colleges, some of the models maybe we don't use. There's a lot of models that we don't even use, but they still put them on the plots. But every country, the Euro models, European, and they get funded, and a lot of science goes into them, and every year they make tweaks.
So are they collecting data? So for instance, the European model, are they collecting data from all over Europe basically, and then they bring in all of that data and that creates the model? Or do you know how that model is really created with the data?
Well, the just because they're in Europe, they still run tropical models for the Atlantic, and so that whole division of the Euro is focused only on, let's say, Atlantic hurricane season. But they're constantly, all these models do is they read upper atmosphere patterns, and it's all low pressure, high pressure. Basically, it comes down to that, and they look a lot at history. They're always correcting themselves. Like they'll go back and the models get tweaked because they'll say, oh, this failed here because let's look back to the Icon example. The Icon did a really good job initializing tropical cyclones this year. The Euro didn't. So, the scientists will definitely tweak the Euro, I'm sure, for next season, and they'll say, oh, we didn't do a good job on the computer thinking, because it all does is read data. Now throw in another wrench, the hurricane hunters.
Yep.
So the hurricane hunters, once we get a storm initialized, let's say, and it becomes an invest, those are just areas of investigation. That's a word a lot of people get confused about. But when I pose there's an invest 90, it's a low pressure system that we might have been talking about it a week ago. Like all the models are showing low pressure forming. But once that low pressure forms, it becomes an invest. Well, then the hurricane hunters, unless it's far Atlantic, they'll fly out and they investigate. They collect so much data that they actually feed the models. So the Euro gets it, the UK gets it. It's free data. Well, it's paid for, but it's data that the models are pulling, and all that data gets fed into all these individual models. So once the hurricane hunters start running, they fly and get infinite amount of upper air pressure, humidity, not only data from the storm itself. They're collecting air ahead of the system, the relative humidity, because that's part of what fuels a storm, how strong the high pressure is, because that controls how it steers. So that's when it really gets real. But the Euro gets that data, the GFS gets the data, just however the computer programmers interpret it. They're just computers.
So the Hurricane Hunter airplanes are instrumented for going into a hurricane.
Yeah, they'll actually fly
Right.
into Hurricane Cat 5
Directly into the center. They
fly in the center, and they'll post pictures on Twitter showing the eye wall, the blue sky. It's rocky. They'll post video. I mean, it's scary. I mean, it's definitely luckily they have great aircraft, but they're flying into it, and it's important. Another thing I've learned over the years is it's not so much what the storm is doing; it's what the weather is ahead of the storm. And everything comes down to high pressure systems. And that's the steering mechanism, because like this year, for example, Hurricane Laura was our strongest storm of the year as far as U.S. Landfall. And it all came down to, how strong the high pressure is to the west was going to determine, is it going to turn a little bit? And cities have to know this for evacuations. So that's why it's so important. These hurricane hunters are gathering not only information from the storm, but they'll fly upper drop zones where they drop instruments into the sky and actually collect data to determine the high pressures. And that's the side. When I started this, I was just looking at spaghetti models. I didn't understand how fascinating steering mechanisms and what makes storms rapidly intensify. And there's so much more than just looking at a spaghetti model now that I'm learning, and I love it, but there's so much more to learn.
So do the hurricane hunters get paid by like the National Weather Service, or who are they actually?
Well, it's NOAA, National Aeronautics, Air Force is involved. So yeah, it's fun. It's in they're divisions of U.S. government. Now I really don't know how the data gets fed internationally, but it definitely gets shared into all these models. And we have groups like Lakeland, where I'm at in Florida, and they're out of I think 4 or 5 different spots around the country they fly out of. So there's different divisions, just like Air Force is, and they're great. They're fun to follow on Twitter. If you go to Twitter, they post a lot, and they enjoy their job. Trust me, they really do.
Okay. So what is your ultimate goal? Like, I mean, do you ever think like, I'd love to be on TV, or I want to grow this to where it's I know you do it daily.
Oh yeah. It's become a little bit of a job. I've given up other jobs. Summer I do that do take a little bit of income here and there, which I don't do it for that. I'm very fortunate to have some supporters that love it. I dedicate 10, 20 hours a day, sometimes 3-4 hours a day just going live. So again, I think if it wasn't the addiction of the hobby, it would become a job. But it's never felt that way. First thing I do when I wake up roll out of bed is sometimes I would set my life around model runs when there's a storm. Like midnight is the last run of the GFS. The Euro usually runs at 1:30 in the morning. I usually wait for the Euro, and I'll get 4 hours sleep, because at 5 o'clock we have a new NHC update. This year we had to cancel family trips, but we take them I still spoil them, so it's not like we're taking away. We still have fun, so I can justify it. But we had storms coming, and I couldn't enjoy myself knowing that I wasn't doing what I love to do, and that's put out information. Because one thing I learned too with this tropic stuff is if you stay away for 12 hours, things change, and you're always playing catch up, trying to understand the latest trends and what's going on. So you become it. It's and then the wintertime, it's sit back and just tweak things. But yeah, ultimately where I want to go, I think I've reached it. I've never dreamed of having 1 million followers. I have some great sponsors, locally Florida, ABC, Fine Wine and Spirits. Who would have thought? They reached out to me, and we got our own beer now that's being sold, and liquor's coming.
Is your beer going to be available nationwide, or?
No, the problem. So we got a great Big Storm Brewery is local, but they're sold through the state. But I guess the old blue laws from back in the day, it's really hard to distribute across state lines. So we're stuck now. They do have distributorship in Texas and maybe Louisiana coming, but the liquor side of it could be interesting. So we'll stay tuned for that. That might be something that spreads all the way to the Carolinas and Texas.
So do you consider Mike's Weather Page your full-time job for income?
No, not for income. Luckily, I do a lot of website work and search engine work.
I see.
Yeah, I grew up. This crazy story with me was I grew up racing radio control cars. Had a big love with NASCAR, and when I got out of college, I actually bought a indoor hobby shop facility that had an indoor racetrack for these little radio control cars. And for about 10, 15 years, that's what I did, and it was pretty successful. But business it just changed course, and hobby kind of slowly died a little bit, and here's this. So I put my marketing to use, that's for sure. I mean, I guess long term, I would love to do a weather convention type of early season for Florida here, at least where I live. One of the companies that supports me, Firm and Generators, we're talking about doing more educational stuff. I started doing storm chasing, and my local city, Oldsmar, was able to use some footage that I got, which I was really, thankful to help out. Last week when we went up to Lake Charles, I filmed a lot of video from some neighborhoods that were still, recovering 6 months later.
I saw that.
Yeah, that was educational. So I think there's another side I can bring is living it as I broadcast it. So that might be where I'm leaning towards is,
okay,
kind of expanding outside of my little office here and, getting more in the field. and
Sure.
yeah, meeting people and just keep having fun with it. But man, the so far it's been amazing. I can count maybe on one hand the amount of negative people we've had, which is crazy if you think about it. Having a million.
Right. So how is the feedback from other, your peers?
Well, locally it's phenomenal.
Is it?
Oh God, I could not be like Dennis Phillips is our local meteorologist here in Tampa Bay. He's an ABC guy. He started using the site. We became friends. He promotes it all the time. He uses it. I'm just blown away. Become a great friend locally. Also, Paul Delgado is our Fox Channel 13 big head Met. He's become a fan and loves it. Bobby Deskins is a local. I mean, it's all the local Mets, and even Mike Clay. Those are the 4 big Mets in our area. And the 5th one that is now where he's the chief meteorologist for Royal Caribbean, James Van Fleet, and he was a big fan. So yeah, it's weird because I'm not stepping on their toes, but they appreciate it. And so far, I've just knock on wood all the time. The Hurricane Hunters have reached out a ton. Back to the beer, we named our beer Hurricane Hunter. I let the fans name our dog. We got a new little dog, and they named it Hunter, Hurricane Hunter. Now we got the beer actually has Hurricane Hunter on the can.
Aww.
And they sent me a picture from Lakeland. They just flew back from a flight from Zeta, and they are all holding the can. It was the coolest moment ever.
That is neat.
Yeah, so they and meeting Jim Cantori this year. I went to Biloxi to chase the storm, and he's a fan. So yeah, so far. Yeah.
What did Jim have to say? What did Jim have to say?
Oh, he just hey, I love your site. He's just a normal guy, totally cursing, and you can tell he's just off the camera he's just one of us. So that was really cool to see. I didn't know what he was going to be like. Big stiff. He was casual and very respectful, and so who the heck knows? I tell my wife every day this could end. I don't know.
No, I don't think so. I really don't, because fortunately for all of us, weather's never going to end, right?
Yes. And then lastly, I need to know, it's back to you're getting at, the coolest thing is that the National Weather Service actually has a list of non-government weather sites, and I share it from time to time, but they show Mike's Weather Page as a good source for tropical information, and they even say that I use a lot of National Weather Service products. So to get their kind of blessing and okay in a sense is cool. That's what the Hurricane Hunters said. They like the one-stop shop, and so as long as it's got to keep it real and fun, and not get serious and try to be something I'm not.
Right. So I know in your apparel shop you have a shirt or it says "Drunk Donkey" on it.
Yeah.
And I think we need an explanation of why.
Yeah. Who would have thought? Well, well, if people, so it's almost a perfect name. People that know me, because I do like to have one now and then. But so I was covering a storm, and it was Florence, which a couple years ago was heading towards the East Coast, and I guess I shared a European model run back again to people say some people like to cherry pick a certain model to get hits and likes. That's what drives meteorologists crazy, because it blows up news stations. Like, oh my God. Well, I shared a model run that I believed in. That I had to believe in something. Well, anyway, local news channel got wind of it, and I guess all their locals were worried about it, to the point that they called me out on the air. They're like, before you all get into it, some dude down in Florida shared this European model. Anybody can share it, And then she went on to say, any drunk donkey can share a European model run. And that was it. Basically calling me out as, a guy named Mike in his, little bedroom, maybe in mom and dad's. I don't know. That's what he was thinking. And it was really a quote, but it really stirred my fans up. And I was doing a live broadcast at the same time. And I happened to read the comments, luckily, and everybody's like, oh, you got to go over here to this site. They're bashing you. And I saved it. They took it off the air. Luckily, I saved it. And so the next day, I have a friend back to the NASCAR stuff. I met a lot of cool people in NASCAR because of those little cars. And I had him whip me up a shirt design. I'm like, hey, draw me this little, let's do this drunk donkey thing. And man, it took off. People were like rallying, like,
Really?
now it's become like a lifestyle, our donkey. So we got it themed now. They beg for shirts. So we draw up. I got one with him driving the Jeep when we storm chased because our Jeep made the news and we were stuck in surge. And so that, it was cool. The funniest story about a drunk donkey thing was even WGN News picked up on it. And they did a little skit on it. And they were using sound effects like, hee-haw, hee-haw. And some weather blogger, now he's selling shirts. It was kind of like making lemonade out of lemons.
Maybe you can send me some of those links and I'll actually
I'll do it. They're and nothing against them, and I even reached out.
Did you?
I was so like, people wanted an apology, and I was like, I don't care, I was like, I found it humorous, and
right.
It didn't offend me. I think the coolest thing that I got going for me is nobody expects me. I'm not an official source, and
right.
So I take 100% pride in what I do. I think people that follow it know that. I mean, I'm proud of like reviews. I got 5 stars. I have 30,000 reviews, 5 stars. I mean, so people trust what I have to say, even though sometimes I'm goofy about it. But I'm very serious. So I wasn't offended by it because they didn't know who we were, and it's happened a few times since then. Different people will call me out, and we just have the best fans. They'll be like, "You don't know them," and I just don't think they understand what we have going. Like how can this guy have 1 million people?
Right.
I don't even know.
When you reached out, did they just not respond?
Tell you the truth, I think I had a corporate email response, like we're looking into it, and they was, but I was also tracking Hurricane Florence. So I mean, again, I was 100% in the storm. And so I don't even think I cared, it was so quick. And then, it's ironic is it indeed did the turn down, which that model showed. That was what I was trying to get at was, hey, this thing's got a high pressure coming in it. And it did curve down and it did stall. And Florence's big story was places like New Bern and various low lying areas in that area were just flooded. Terrible.
So you got it right.
Well, the model got it right.
Well,
but I hear what you're saying. Yeah, no,
The model prediction was correct.
That model, right?
That model at that time predicted it correctly, which you picked out of all the models. You picked the correct one that you thought was indeed going to be correct.
Yes, and that's kind of how I do it. And I do take, when I hit that enter button,
right,
it's like responsibility. I've been, wrong a lot, but I like to think I've been right a lot. And that, like you said, I could have took a different run that might have had it going to New England. And that storm, again, let's talk about the media real quick. So that storm was a Category 4. Well, when it first came out of Africa, everybody expected it to do a recurve. They call it a recurve. It's a weird word I learned, but recurve is basically when they come out of Africa, they curve back to sea. They call them fish storms because they don't hurt nobody. So when the storm first came off Africa, everybody expected it to curve out to sea, and they blew it off. Well, I remember we were like, I don't know. There was a few ensembles suggesting otherwise. I mean, hey, you got to keep an eye on this thing. And it kept doing this riding up through the Atlantic, coming back down. Well, then it was a Category 4, and it was all over the news. It's 10 days out, and it's all over the news. Category 4, Florence. And it got people so ramped up. It ended up being a category, it weakened upon landfall. But now fast forward to like Hurricane Michael, for example. Amazing stat, every Category 5 hurricane that the United States has had, 3 days out was only a tropical storm. 3 days out. And that's Andrew, most recently Hurricane Michael. So that storm 3 days out didn't get any coverage. And that's where I picked up a lot of fans in the Panhandle area, because every single model, like people recall me saying during my live, and I tried to find it, I couldn't, but I basically said, I take this really serious, and if you lived in this area, I would be preparing for the worst, because 5 runs were showing 920, 930 millibar system, which is, Cat 4 or 5, 3, 4, 5. And the news wasn't talking about it because it was only a tropical storm 3 days out. And that, the difference of media is because it wasn't a 5 that wasn't getting the press that Florence got, that ended up being like a 1, even though it was still a flooding issue.
Do you think that's a disservice to the people?
People think it was, especially the ones that lived up there, because some of the locals think that they blow off storms because they're worried about tourists.
Interesting.
Bookings for weekends. I don't know if it's official or not. Like the mayor of Lynn Haven actually emailed me and left an awesome review that that I had the best coverage, and they were unfortunately the ones that were hit. So it was really kind of surreal to think that the mayor was watching my forecast. And I wasn't forecasting again, but when another thing I do is I clarify, like, I'll put all 5 of these runs together and show, hey, look, you got all the big ones stay in Cat 4. And what kind of gets me a little frustrated sometimes with the official forecasting is they don't knee-jerk reaction. They had it going in as a storm originally. Like if you go back to the archive, you'll see they slowly adjust to the models. And I think that's probably the best thing. But I've noticed intensity models this year, especially, storms have all been stronger. Not all, can't say all, but most of them have ended up being stronger than what they originally were forecast to be. Now, I picked up on this early in the season, as others did, but we have a model called the H-WRF, which is a hurricane-specific model that only runs when there's an actual storm. So this H-WRF people used to laugh about, but it was predicting, like Hurricane Hannah early in the season ended up being a pretty strong hurricane hit Texas. And it was the only one showing a strong system. And then what we found out through the year, almost every storm, GFS and Euro showing a weak little tropical storm, and all of a sudden, the H-WRF showing a Cat 2, 3. So, I learned again, I used the icon for formation, maybe GFS for track, H-WRF for intensity. Toward the end of the season, the National Weather Service started using worded, like they would say, and the very accurate H-WRF this season is predicting this. This is why we are up in the intensity over global models. Meaning, hey, our normal Euro and GFS ain't working this year. We've just found out this year the H-WRF is doing good, and now in their wording they actually said that. And so it's awesome reading their discussions, because they'll actually say things like, we're talking about that, this model's doing this model's doing that. Based on what we've seen this year, we're going to take a blend of this model with the H-WRF. So, it's fascinating. I think the how, and I always get frustrated too with October. Another thing with Michael, I swear I've seen it every year. Once football, I always say fall in football. If it's June, all you hear about in the news is hurricanes, because it's the start of season. Right. Come October, you can't get anything, because they're talking about fall leave colors, talking about football, college football, and NFL. Tropics get like a little blip. And some of our biggest hurricanes have been in October. Michael was October. So that frustrates the heck out of me, because of the coverage changes, I think, based on the season.
Interesting. Do you feel like in TV mainly that those meteorologists are driven corporately to what they should and should not report?
I've talked the guys. I do that podcast with Tom and Dan. They brought that up in the local radio show. Drew Garabo, I get to do stuff with them guys, and they said the exact same thing you just did. So a lot of them believe it. I think certain news stations have a hype mode, maybe, and certain news stations want their model to be low. And I hear it in our market, because we have 5 stations in Tampa. I can tell one station, I think their business model is probably, let's be the low tone guys. And they constantly kind of, when they're right, they'll blast like, we told you this was not, and then they get criticized. I'll see it on my page. The guys over here downplayed this thing. You were right all along. Not right, but I was showing the possibilities again. And then, of course, there's other meteorologists in the world that just go crazy. They'll post that crazy GFS run. So I definitely think it's they're driven by basically what their model needs to be, and they only get 3 minutes. That's the problem. That's what Dennis talks about. I mean, these poor TV guys get 3 minutes to talk about, sunrise, sunset, water temp, tomorrow's forecast, and hurricanes.
Right.
And I don't know how they do it.
And you take in your live, I've seen way over an hour.
Very. And then during storms, I'll go live sometimes in the afternoon and at night. And I don't, again, it's kind of me just thinking out loud. But again, things change. It seems like they change. I know, I know, like if I take off 12 hours to do something with my daughter's softball, I feel like I miss so much. And I think that's what the local meteorologists, they don't see trends. They're not seeing these ensembles change, and it's become a hobby for so many other people. I think our base just gets fascinated,
Right.
tracking the what ifs. I mean, doing Ada just a couple of weeks ago. I went down to the Keys. We were in the outer eye wall. It was pretty intense, but then it ended up here by my hometown in Pinellas County, which is Clearwater, St. Petersburg, and we had the highest surge ever in Tampa Bay since they started recording in '91. And this was a tropical storm that was 50 miles offshore that never made landfall here. It just scooted by. But the what got me going and it spread, I think, in our community was at 3 o'clock when it was low tide, the water was already up and it was coming into the bay. When we had a southeast wind, it should have been blowing all the water out. And I was like, I don't know, this is not good. The high tides at noon, the storm's going to be right here, and the winds of a storm blows water into our bay. Well, indeed, we had surge like people have never. They had water rescues going on at midnight, going door to door to people's houses because nobody knew it was coming. Nobody knew. I think they blew it off as an afternoon thunderstorm. They didn't look at the what if factor. They were expecting a head on hit, only a tropical storm. It was the surge that nobody really even talked about.
But how did the local stations not report that? I mean, these meteorologists are certainly studying the data just like you, right? And they have access to equal, if not more, data than you, correct?
Oh yeah, they do. And the National Weather Service feeds information to these local guys, and I'm sure there was a couple of them doing a good job. But the feeling, like I remember calling in that radio show, and I was sitting in the parking lot down by the. I went down to Madeira Beach. We have a little intercoastal road. And
okay.
I was like, I even said on the radio, I was like, I don't think people realize what's coming. They're just driving around like it's a normal night. And they're driving through mass puddles of water, so I hung out at this place called Hubbard's Marina, and real famous John's Pass, and Dylan Hubbard owns it, and his grandfather owned it. And he said it was the worst surge they've ever seen. And I have video of all these businesses underwater. I drove back to our hometown of Oldsmar, which is in the Upper Bay. There was dozens of homes underwater, and these people were coming out of their bedrooms at midnight. They had they're waking up to water. So again, it's late season storm, and I think the fact it was just a tropical storm off the coast, everybody blew it off. So it was incredible. I mean, the surge video that I got. I just couldn't. Everywhere I looked, there was water. Still people recovering.
Wow.
So again, I mean, it's like it doesn't even have to be Category 5,
right?
And again, that's me being out in the field. I think the only criticism, back to that again, the only criticism I ever got was doing these storm chasing episodes. People rather me be up to the storm, which I get. But a lot of what I do is leading up to the storm, and realistically, 6 hours, 12 hours out, people kind of know where it's going.
Right.
And I'm still reporting on the side of the road, so it's just taking a few to adjust. But I love it. I love being out and seeing it. I've learned so much this year on the other side that just the damage, like we talked about before from Laura. I mean, now I can explain it. Like if we got a Category 4 storm coming, this is what you're going to get. I mean. Right. You hear about it, you see about it, and like, whatever. And like, I'm scared now. I mean, and I'm not a hyper, but if we get a Category 4 storm where I live, I'm not going to get excited about it. I mean, in the past, I can say deep down inside, everybody always gets a little excited about a storm. Like, Trust me.
Good experience, right?
You don't want it. Yeah.
Right. And are you on the coast? Are you really that close to the water?
Oh yeah, yeah. There's these slosh maps, they call them, from NOAA that you can look up, and I have some links on my site. But you can look up the worst case scenario with surge, and I'm in an area that Cat 3. Again, I've always been fascinated with Tampa Bay because Irma blew literally all the water out of Tampa Bay. It was the craziest thing ever. So when Irma was down in the Bahamas, there was these videos on Twitter that I didn't believe. They were showing dried up docks, and I'm like, what the heck? And it was because Irma was so big, the winds were blowing the water out before they blew it in. So Irma was to our south, and literally the counterclockwise flow of the winds blew the water out of the bay. And I went out there with my daughter, and we walked out a couple hundred yards where the Gulf usually is. Still to this day. And then there's people in Upper Tampa, Davis Island's real famous, just no water, and they're
literally dry.
Yeah, it was just because the water, the power of wind.
That's incredible.
Now going back to your thing about where I live, they had record surge from Irma. When Irma was down in Naples, they were getting flooding up in Brunswick, Jacksonville, Charleston, because the wind field counterclockwise was blowing the water that way. So fast forward to where we live now, if Irma was to our north just a little bit, kind of like this tropical storm Eta was, we had 4 foot of surge on top of tide. That's not including tide from a tropical storm 50 miles out. 4 foot. You get a category 3-4 storm to our north and blowing that water in where we live. I believe back to these slosh maps. It shows basically Pinellas County would be an island. And
wow.
And those are that's real. Like they say, you can hide from the wind. I believe that, but the water you don't mess with. And it's scary. The water surge. I drove through lower 9th Ward last week when we went there for storm chasing, and just thinking what all those folks had to deal with flooding and I can tell you this, when I cover the storms next series, there'll be a little more tone in my voice when we start talking about the what ifs. Right. And it just like driving around at night, like one of the storms, we went to Hurricanes Delta, power lines on the road. It was pitch black. You turn a corner, there's a telephone pole completely across the road. That's why they tell you, evacuate and, stay in your house. Don't be driving around because you don't know what you're going to run into.
Which leads me to the next question of how do the local authorities feel about you chasing a storm now?
Well, yeah, and I get some criticism, like I shouldn't be out there. Twice though, where we ended up with Zeta, a little town called Gaydon, Louisiana. I had a cop, local sheriff, pulled up next to me, and once he found out who we were, he was really cool. He's like, follow me. So that was neat. And then I did get pulled over in a town that was mandatory evacuation, and I got this on my Facebook Live. It was the funniest thing ever because I Facebook Live this stuff and had a few thousand people on there with me, and I'm like, oh crap, I just got pulled over. And the cop pulls up and he goes, what the hell are you doing? And I said, we're heading to Florida, man. I'm getting out of here. And he goes, what? He goes, what made you decide in the middle of a hurricane, in the middle of the night, to just take off and go to Florida? And he was like, had that Louisiana accent. Yep. I think he probably thought I was a local. Like, there's power. I'm driving over. We just turned around from power lines on the road, and but then I told him, he goes, oh, you're one of them guys. Oh, okay. So yeah, I think and what I did with Laura, trust me, as much coverage as you can give these people, that's the number one thanks I get. People loved riding around with me because they might have evacuated and they're seeing their roads. And they're like, oh man, thanks for going because I live down that road, or so I think it does serve an important part of this for sure. I mean, there's some that take it more entertainment value, and in the sense I guess I do too because I love weather, but I do see a lot of positives with it. Okay,
and you enjoy it, right? I mean,
that's yeah.
That you enjoy being out in the field and chasing the storms and. Not only the adventure and the excitement, but of course the end result of bringing your watchers and listeners something valuable, right?
Oh yes, 100%, totally. And that I think I didn't dream of any of this when we did it. And it's I guess it's very humbling to meet fans. It's just weird. Like everywhere we've gone this season, we've run into fans or they found us based on our lives. Like we were down in Key West and people were pulling up. Hey, we knew you were here. And,
Oh, that's cool.
yeah, that was, so that's neat. Our first storm, one of our big supporters, Lodging Solutions, is a company that's always say, Michael, like to put a little ad on your site, support you. And turned out they're like this massive company that deploys these portable cities. I didn't even know this industry existed. So when we flew out there, I met them and we toured. They have warehouse after warehouse after warehouse. They set up mobile base camps for all the line workers, for example. And overnight, they set up a city for 5,000 to 10,000 people. They provide beds, sheets, cots, 3 warm cooked meals a day, water, showers, everything. I didn't even know this existed.
And this is a privately owned company?
I don't know. Yeah, it is private, but they do a lot of government work.
Sure.
They actually house military when they're coming back from overseas because of COVID restrictions.
Wow.
They recently got into firefighters. It's a service that, think about it. So you have thousands of line workers going up to these storms, right? And where do they stay?
Right.
So they actually are, part of their employers are the power companies. They'll be like, hey, we need bedding for 2,000 people. But the mobile operation, like the kitchen, like a kitchen on wheels, 5,000 times 3 meals a day. It's just incredible. So we met. So getting back to that, I learned more about linemen and the recovery and stuff I never even dreamed about. Like you don't realize how important it is to get power back and who's doing that. Like how, where do these, who funds this? Who, where do they stay? And
do you know who funds it? Do you know how that works? Because that's a fascinating thing to me.
It was fascinating. No, I think, like I said, I think a lot of it's government because it's a service.
Sure.
And power companies that are owned by, they're the ones sending the line workers in. And I'm sure because it's a disaster, there's emergency funds allocated for all this stuff. So I don't think they're doing it any more than what I think it started as probably a smaller thing. But they even have beds on trucks. Like they have semis that are fully sleep 24 people mobily, and it's just fascinating. I got to link Lodging Solutions. So that was our first trip. So again, going back to like why I'm doing this, and I saw an aerial photo of their operation after Laura.
Okay.
Holy cow! I mean, it's just like one huge city with air conditioners and showers and just it's fascinating. Totally had no idea.
Right.
Learned so much doing this.
So after Katrina, right, there was some talk about how long and how devastated Katrina left New Orleans, right?
Mm-hmm.
And from what I've heard, it's still in places
Mm-hmm.
devastated. Do you know if that is indeed true?
Well, we drove down through some of the lower Ninth Ward, and I mean, there are a lot of businesses shut down now. It's hard to tell if it's because of Corona or not, but it looks like it's a lot of damages still from Katrina. You see a lot of houses still torn apart or businesses. And what I just saw this past week from Laura, and people said the same thing with Michael and obviously other storms. It takes years to recover, and I wouldn't even know where to begin. Katrina, I don't know. I wasn't that involved back then. I know it was a huge mess. Getting assistance and because nothing like that ever happened. And again, I mean, if something like that were to happen to Tampa, I mean, or Jacksonville or anywhere, Miami, any city. I just don't know. And seeing, I know I keep saying it, but just seeing hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of homes last weekend that are still not even close to being livable. You see pods outside, portable storage and generators running. I don't know, years to recovery. I wish it was an easier solution. Number one complaint that my fans say, and now I believe it is, the post-storm, people forget, And
Right.
yeah, we're enjoying Christmas and New Year's, and these poor folks,
Nothing.
and they're still like waiting for. They're probably waiting, their line. There's only so many roofers in the world.
Right.
So yeah, it's.
Is there an organization that people can donate to?
Oh yeah, there's always, but I don't know.
Understood.
It's going to take a while. No, I'm just saying. I know there was a ton set up, but like I said, it doesn't even look like they've made a scratch, in this whole recovery process. So yeah, it's. Now I know why people take the hurricanes. I can see it in my website numbers. Even when we have a good tornado threat, nothing like a hurricane. Like people really, because a lot of people have lived it, and and now I can definitely say I've kind of lived it through other people.
Well, I was online watching your stream during one of ours, and you had, I want to say it was over 50,000 people watching a live stream.
I've had some big numbers.
And it might have been more than that. It was big. Yeah,
and the cool thing with Facebook now is that I get metrics.
Right.
So there, we like during Laura, I think I hit 20 million eyeballs for that month.
Incredible.
That's crazy. That's almost 10th of the population. It's at least 18 and over population, the 10th. So and then using YouTube now is great. Getting the word out, and so many people are turning to social media that I think that's a little niche.
Sure.
I've been lucky to get in on. Others are doing it now too.
Great.
So I have to do mine a little. I have to keep it real. Got to keep it up a little more fun, than.
Well, you're doing a great job, Mike. I really want to thank you for taking the time out and speak with me.
Yes, thank you.
It's been great. Learned a lot, actually, which is always wonderful for myself and hopefully the listeners as well. And if anybody wants to check out spaghettimodels.com, there it is, or on Facebook, which is Mike's weather page on Facebook, and buy yourself a Drunk Donkey shirt, hat, and go visit a local brewery, and you can buy the beer that's called, what is it?
Hurricane Hunter.
Hurricane Hunter beer.
Yeah,
and what kind of beer is it exactly?
It's a tropical IPA. There you go. There's a picture right there.
Oh, there you go.
There's my dog flying the airplane.
All right.
They're going to make it a four can series. That's going to be the staple. That's like a tangerine IPA, and then the next one's going to be like a New Zealand hop. So they're going to change the can design. It's going to be a fun series.
Cool.
That's been, again, who would have thought, right?
Yeah, and do you get to be the taste tester?
Oh yeah. I got the sample. I actually went and bought a kegerator just so I could have my own little tap handle with Hurricane Hunter on it.
There you go.
But
excellent.
I didn't drink any today. I promise. I'm still sipping water. So.
All right, good job. Thank you so much, Mike.
Thank you.
And look forward to more broadcasts.
All right, buddy. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. Find us on YouTube and Facebook at The Intellectual People Podcast and online at theintellectualpeoplepodcast.com. Check back for exciting new episodes.